Hi, this is Michaela from Team Retro, where we like retro games and we like the devices that bring them to us. So today we have a very different device for you. This is not a device that we are going to have to tweak or manipulate in any way. This is actually a device that we can just pick up and plug and play. And this is called the Evercade EXP. Now, Evercade is part of an ecosystem of cartridge-based games that work across 3 of their devices: the original Evercade handheld, the Evercade versus console, and this one here, the Evercade EXP. So I got this device around December, and it wasn't until recently that I've been able to open it up and actually put it through its paces. And I purposely have been avoiding watching other YouTube content on the Evercade EXP because I bought this device uninfluenced. I just saw it on Amazon one day and thought it was cool, and this is probably going to be the first device that I have purchased for this channel without actually doing my research first. And we're going to do an in-depth review and see if this is worth your time and money. And we're also going to look at some of the cartridges that you can purchase for this device. So let's dive in and let's get to work. Alright, let's start by taking a look at what's in the box. What you actually get with this specific device is 15 built-in Capcom games that are on the hard drive of the Evercade itself. And then they also sent an Evercade IRAM arcade collection that has another 10 games from IRAM. And the first thing I noticed when I started to do this unboxing is just these beautiful color manuals that come with these cartridges. And I haven't flipped through a color manual for a video game in a very long time. So this actually brought back memories of my childhood reading the manual in anticipation of playing the actual game when I got home from the store. So it was just very nice to see in 2023 this actual nifty little manual here, and every single Evercade cartridge comes with one of these. And not only does the manual give you little tips, tricks, and Easter eggs for the various games in the Capcom collection, it also tells you which games work in TATE Mode, which is a unique feature with this device. You can actually play games in a vertical rotation without having to have special software or program RetroArch or do any of that stuff, which is really cool, and we're going to explore that further in this video. So let's open up the IRAM cartridge here just to show you what the cartridges look like. Now these are universal, like I said earlier, across all of Evercade's platforms. So if you have other Evercade devices, you can put this cartridge in them as well. And as you can see, we have another beautifully colored manual that shows you each game and the controls and a little bit on what the game is about. Alright, let's take a tour around the device. In the front you have a 4.3-inch 800 by 480 IPS screen. Now this is not OCA laminated. You also have your controls and your face buttons, your start and select, and your menu buttons. Now let's take a look at this D-pad here. I'm actually not a fan of this D-pad at all. There's just something about it. It's one piece. It looks like it's just kind of hovering there. It's probably on a joystick style sensor, but it just feels really weird and out of place, almost like something out of the 3DS era. And because you have that gap underneath, that does seem like you're going to get some dust and grime under there. Now let's take a look under the D-pad at the A and B buttons designed for TATE Mode. And these are extra buttons that are put on the device in case you want to flip it vertical and play some of the compatible games in TATE mode. Underneath the device, you have two downward-facing speakers, as well as that dedicated TATE Mode button, a 3.5mm headphone jack, USB-C for charging, your volume up and down buttons, as well as a light which is usually green when the device is turned on, and red when it needs to charge or is charging. At the top of the device, you have stacked shoulder buttons for L1, R1, R2, and L2. You have a micro HDMI out, your power button, as well as your cartridge slot, and what appears to be a heat exhaust at the top of the unit there, what those 5 holes are. And then on the back, you have just your standard ventilation, and here's a better shot at the cartridge reader. Now, the appeal of this device is that it doesn't really need to be tinkered with. What you end up doing is buying these Evercade multi-game cartridges, which are essentially modified micro SD cards built into a cartridge slot, and they run at about $20 to $30 each depending on which one you pick up. But I amassed in the several weeks since I got this device a pretty small collection of Evercade games that I was able to find pretty easily on Amazon and Best Buy. And just like before, each of these comes with its own color instruction book, so this is definitely meant to be for collectors or people who are nostalgic for this type of experience. And once you perform initial setup, you are greeted with a pretty bare bones menu. You have a settings section where you can change the aspect ratio and even add things such as bezels or scan lines. You can actually control the device brightness and dynamic rate control right from this menu, as well as turn on screen dimming. I usually like to leave it off because this is just a standard IPS display. I don't really need to worry about burn-in or anything like that, but there are plenty of options here for you. Now, these options are pretty bare bones. They're just meant for the audio and visual preferences that you would like, but for the most part, you're just going to be able to change the language and maybe set a theme. Now, I did have an issue here when I did try to change the theme where the system actually froze up and I had to restart it, but once I restarted it, the theme was applied. It just wasn't one that I really wanted. I was only changing it to test. So I'm going to use this blue and gold theme here. I find that to be the best at the moment. Now, unique to this model is the EXP menu, where you're going to find your built-in Capcom games that you can only get on this system, as well as 5 hidden games that you either need to put in a password combination or a secret code in order to get to work. And these are pretty nifty. I'm gonna leave the codes for you to figure out, but these aren't meant to be anything too exciting or crazy. They're just your typical hidden base games, and I actually couldn't figure out quite a bit of them, like this NNNNN game. I just kept dying. I just couldn't control the character and couldn't figure out the patterns. But this other game here, Kusa 1 and 2, this was a little bit more of a Zelda-y type dungeon game, and it was very quick. I finished it within a matter of minutes. It was really only one dungeon, and I didn't see anything in the realm of difficulty levels. It was just a cool little add-on to have, but I don't think that it was a primary reason to purchase this device. Now let's get into some actual gameplay footage of the Capcom collection, and we're going to start with Mega Man X because At the default visual settings, I did notice just the slightest bit of pixel distortion, specifically looking at the life bar on the left. So there are a couple of ways that you could fix this if it bothers you. One, you can put in scan lines just because the game was meant to be played on a CRT screen, so the pixels will look a little bit more streamlined with the scan lines in place, but it's not going to be perfect. But if you set it to pixel perfect, that will actually fix the problem in its entirety, and you'll get the pixels on the life bar exactly the way they were meant to be. And the only sacrifice here, because the screen is so small, is that you will have small black bars on the top and bottom. So it's up to you if you need to have that aspect ratio or if you would rather have the correct pixels per screen. Now let's focus on this D-pad here on the right, and it's just going to become more obvious here using Street Fighter how I'm not a fan of this D-pad, because not only does it just not feel quite right, I also had to really get used to it in order to actually be able to use it with Street Fighter to pull off combo moves, and even then it wasn't a perfect experience. However, let's bring up a positive here, and that's that I'm actually really happy that they included a role-playing game in this Capcom collection. Breath of Fire is a really good RPG from the SNES days, and if you don't have this game, or if you don't have an emulation device, and you want a simple device in order to play this specific RPG, sure, the Evercade EXP is one way to do it. So I'm just glad to see some RPG representation in a retro system. Now, you also do get save state support with the Evercade EXP, so you could do a quick save, a load last save, or you could just do a regular save and load, and you do have quite a bit of save state slots here, and these are all saved to the device if you're using the built-in games, and they're also saved directly to the cartridge if you have a cartridge plugged into the system, which means if you were to buy another Evercade device and put a cartridge in, then you can definitely keep your save states and your progress. Now let's take a look at TATE Mode gameplay, and one of the reasons I like the dedicated buttons on this device for TATE Mode is that there's no guesswork or reconfiguration involved here. You simply just hit that button on the bottom with a compatible game. And I was really excited about this prospect because one of the games that I really wanted to play in TATE Mode was Galaga. However, I turned out to be very disappointed because it's the NES version of Galaga on this Namco cartridge, and it's not one of the games that is compatible with TATE Mode as of yet. Now, I was able to go into the display settings and switch it to full screen, and if I do this, yeah, sure, I guess I get TATE Mode Galaga, but everything's all stretched out and it just doesn't feel right to be a retro handheld enthusiast and to willingly tolerate these stretched pixels. But I guess if I want to play Galaga in TATE mode, I can with this method. It just doesn't feel quite right, and I'm hoping that Evercade does manage to get a proper TATE version of Galaga out. However, Evercade does have about 20 or so TATE mode ready games across all the different cartridges that they create, make, and support. And so, if you have an existing collection or you just started collecting, and you are interested in specifically TATE mode, there are quite a few games that you will be able to enjoy once you pick up the requisite cartridge. This Data East one has Burger Time on it, and it's actually a lot of fun. And then this Mysterious Stones one from the Technos Arcade collection, It just seems interesting to me. This is not one that I've ever played. It also seems a little bit on the difficult side, so this might be one that it's a good thing it's an arcade version because you could just keep inserting fake coins and trying to manage your way through it if you're up for a challenge. Now, TATE Mode is also supported on external monitors as long as you switch that monitor to the side or you switch it to a portrait rotation. Here I am playing Legendary Wings with the system hooked up to an old TV via an HDMI mini to HDMI adapter. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this the way I did. I took an old TV, I tilted it on its side, and I propped it up on a hardcover cookbook just for the purpose of recording this footage. But a typical use of this would probably be if you have a monitor on a VESA mount that rotates, or you have an extra vertical monitor that you have set up in your office or game room, or maybe you want to use this as a dedicated arcade machine, and so you want this set up in a portrait position specifically to play TATE mode games, and the option is available to you if you want to use it. I'm not sure how many people are going to actually take advantage of this, but it was pretty cool of Evercade to include it. A couple of other games worth mentioning from the Irem collection that does come packaged with the Evercade EXP is this game called Lightning Swords, only because I decided to pick out a couple of games that I felt would be worth trying that I've never played before in this collection. And out of all of them, this one sucked me in the most, and I ended up playing this for a good hour after I was done testing. One thing the Evercade is good for is having a ready selection of shmups ready to go, and R-Type is a prime example of one of these shmups, and probably one of the most fun that I've had playing a shoot 'em up game like this in a while, and this is a big recommend if you are picking this up. Now, I picked up the Technos Arcade Collection because it had Double Dragon 2, and this game, as hard as it is, has a big connection to my childhood because whenever my father and I would go to pick up Chinese food from the local restaurant, and my dad would always give me a quarter or two to play Double Dragon 2 while we waited for our food. And it was hard back then, and it's still hard now, but thankfully I no longer have a quarter limit, and I also have save states, so maybe I'll actually beat this game. And finally, if you purchase this device and you only plan on buying one other cartridge, let it be the Alma's Awakening and Cathedral 2-pack, because these are newer games in a retro 8-bit style that are incredibly fun to play, and they have amazing soundtracks. And this is the only way to get a physical version of Cathedral at this moment, as it was natively made for the Evercade series of systems. Now, if you have no interest in picking up an Evercade, maybe you're watching this video and there are certain things that were a deal breaker for you, but you still want to play Alwa's Awakening and Cathedral, they are available on Steam. So whether you decide to pick up this device or not, I would not sleep on these two games because they are phenomenal and they have some really great soundtracks. Alright, let's get into commendations and condemnations on this device. And we're going to start with commendations first. I like that this is a simple plug-and-play handheld that is a retro version of something like a Nintendo Switch Lite, where you just purchase the games and you plug them in and you play, which make this a great prospect for collectors, specifically collectors who don't like the gray areas that come with ROM legality, and they just want nice licensed versions of their retro games, and they want some no frills, no complicated setup, TATE Mode support, and this device offers all of that in spades. Now, there are some condemnations that go with this device. One being a me problem, which always happens when I review a device, is that I really wanted to play TATE Mode Galaga, and there just isn't a way to do that quite yet. But I'm confident that one way or another that will happen in the future. I am very spoiled and love my OCA laminated screens, and so I'm a little bit disappointed that this device does not have an OCA laminated screen, but my understanding is that it's still a major step up from the original TN panel of the first Evercade handheld. Now, there is a very weird D-pad, and I talked about this enough times in this video, but I'm not a fan of it. It is serviceable for what it can do with these games, but I kind of wish that it was just a standard rubber membrane D-pad. And this device costs about $150, and that's before you get invested in the ecosystem of the cartridges. And I kind of feel like for what this is, $150 is a little bit on the steep side, especially considering that you can get something like a Miu Mini or an Anbernic RG35XX for a little bit cheaper, and you have access to more games than what is provided with this system. And so the ultimate question on whether to buy this system or not is wholly dependent on you and the type of retro gaming that you want to do. If you want to have these physical cartridges or you don't want to emulate, then by all means, this is a great portable system that will get you through some old school type arcade games. But if you're not really into the arcade scene and you're more of a Nintendo and Super Nintendo person, then this device may not be for you. However, you may decide that you want to try the Cathedral and Alwa's Awakening setup, and then you might have to judge as to whether you want to just get it on Steam or you want to have a specific device dedicated to those two games, and there really is nothing wrong with either choice. Either way, I am very happy with this handheld personally because I don't have to fiddle with having to manipulate RetroArch in order to put my games into TATE mode. I could just push a button and I could just play some shmups. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Is this going to be your dedicated TATE mode handheld? Or do you just happen to like the games in the Capcom collection? Maybe this is going to be how you finish Breath of Fire. Or is this a device that you are ultimately going to pass on because you're not really a collector? And please feel free to continue the conversation in the Steam Machine Discord. Link will be in the video description. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if this was helpful to you in any way, please be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.